the mechanism of mobilizing energy from the fat. So these are the various steps of how energy is being produced from fat. The first step will be ingestion, absorption of fat, chylomicrons, lipoprotein, esterification, which I'll be telling in detail in the coming slides. So what happens? So whenever you eat or whenever you intake food, they get broken down by the pancreatic and the gastric lipase. So they get broken down by the pancreatic and gastric lipase into free fatty acids and long chain triglycerides. So these substances, the free fatty acid and the long chain triglycerides, will get absorbed in the small bowel. So these free fatty acids and long chain triglycerides will get absorbed by the small bowel. And meanwhile, what happens? We all know this chylomicrons. This chylomicrons, they get absorbed from the lymphatic channels. They get absorbed into the systemic venous circulation. So they're getting absorbed into the circulation. They're being actively removed by the hepatic parenchymal cells. So during this process, what happens is that lipoproteins are being released. So when this lipoprotein they come in contact with adipose tissue by means of lipoprotein lipase enzyme, they get broken down into free fatty acids. This free fatty acid has to be esterified. So now what happens? This free fatty acid along with glycerophosphate, this glycerophosphate, the substrate glycerophosphate is glucose is the substrate for glycerophosphate. So glucose gives glycerophosphate, and this glycerophosphate is going to react with free fatty acid and it is going to form the compound which is called as triglycerides. So we'll again revise from the first. So whenever you ingestion of fat, it will be broken down by the pancreatic and gastric lipase, and free fatty acids and long chain triglycerides will be released and they get actively absorbed from the small bowel. Meanwhile, chylomicrons from the lymphatic channels, they get absorbed into the systemic venous circulation and they are actively being removed by the hepatic parenchymal cells, and during this process lipoproteins are released, and this lipoprotein when it comes in contact with the adipose tissue, with the help of lipoprotein lipase enzyme, they get broken down into free fatty acid, and this free fatty acid is being esterified, and this process is called as esterification. So they are going to be esterified with glycerophosphate to form triglycerides. So now you see this is a pictorial representation of what I told before. You can see glucose with the help of insulin, it is entering into the fat cell, and this glucose will be converted into glucose 6-phosphate, and meanwhile when glucose is being converted to glucose 6-phosphate, it releases acetyl-CoA. Now the free fatty acid which is entering into the fat cell will combine with acetyl-CoA and form acyl fatty acid-CoA. Meanwhile, glucose 6-phosphate will be converted to glycerophosphate, and this glycerophosphate along with acyl fatty acid-CoA, it is going to form triglycerides. And this triglycerides, during lipolysis, what happens? It gets converted back again to free fatty acids and glycerol, which is going to enter into the liver. Glycerol goes into the liver and free fatty acid will go into the circulation.